post-Attitude Era, there's no one in wrestling who's managed to reach the heights of John Cena. Since the early 2000s, in fact, whether loved or hated, he's been able to carry the WWE on his back as its top star, continuing on in this manner for over a decade, longer than either Hulk Hogan, Steve Austin, or The Rock lasted in that role. In recent years, though, it seems as though he's finally readying himself to retire, with his in-ring appearances becoming more and more of a rarity. So join us today as we take a deep dive into his entire career journey in You Can't See Me, The John Cena Story. John Felix Anthony Cena was born in West Newbury, Massachusetts on April 23, 1977, to parents John and Carol. One of 5 boys, John's early life was filled with a lot of sports being watched on TV, primarily pro wrestling and football. And it was the latter of which he would play for a while when he went to Springfield College in the late 90s, becoming an NCAA Division III All-American center on their team. After graduating, however, football became less of a focus for the youngster as he instead began focusing on bodybuilding, with this passion eventually seeing him come to the attention of the wrestling world as a number of people within it realized that with his size and charisma, he would be a natural in the ring. This was how, in 1999, he began training at Ultimate Pro Wrestling, spending the next 2 years after that learning the ropes of the business. By late 2000, he had even caught the attention of WWE, who invited him to a SmackDown taping for a tryout match. Only a few months later, and John had formally signed a developmental contract with the company, being sent to Ohio Valley Wrestling from there, where he would become a part of the now iconic class, which also featured Brock Lesnar, Randy Orton, and Dave Bautista. And it was in OVW that he found his first real success as a performer, at different times winning both their world title and tag team titles, all while wrestling under the name of The Prototype. And Vince McMahon must have been paying close attention to this because in the early months of 2002, he began featuring Cena at a number of live events in preparation for a main roster call-up. This call-up happening on June 27th of that year when, after the boss had told the roster they needed to find some ruthless aggression just days before, the future face of the company appeared on SmackDown, now under his real name, to accept Kurt Angle's open challenge. Of course, he would lose that match, but that didn't really matter because it was all about the impact Cena was able to make. And make an impact he most certainly did, as in the weeks that followed, he would establish himself as one to be watched when he entered into feuds with the likes of Chris Jericho and Los Guerreros. That said though, something was still missing, and when his momentum began to cool soon after, there were concerns that he wasn't going to make it long-term on the main roster. It's even gone into company myth in the years since that he was almost cut altogether around this time, and it was only when Stephanie McMahon saw him rapping on a coach going to a show one night that she suggested he try this on screen. That would be the birth of the Doctor of Thugonomics, a white boy rapper character who would cut rhymes on his opponents prior to matches, and who was first introduced on the 2002 Halloween episode of SmackDown. And this, combined with a fresh heel turn, was enough for Cena to unlock everything he had been missing up until then, as the full scope of his personality suddenly became apparent to fans and he exploded in popularity. During this time, he rose up the card as he got big wins over Eddie Guerrero, Chris Benoit, and The Undertaker, all before knocking at the door of the then WWE Champion Brock Lesnar. This led to a memorable feud between the two, and while John didn't win the title at this time, he did use the success of the program to segue into a proper feud with The Undertaker, the match between them taking place at July 27, 2003's Vengeance pay-per-view, and seeing Cena lose but earn the dead man's respect in the process. After that, the soon-to-be face of the company turned babyface and set his sights on winning the United States Championship, then being held by Eddie Guerrero. Now, as it turned out, he wouldn't be able to win the title quite yet, but his new good guy alignment did see him briefly join forces with Kurt Angle and Chris Benoit. Following that, he had another shot at the US belt, which was now being held by The Big Show in a match at WrestleMania 20. And it was on this night that Cena would finally become Big Match John when he was able to beat the Giant to snag the gold, his first on WWE's main roster. From there, he held on to the title for the next 4 months, successfully defending it against the likes of Rene Dupree, Rob Van Dam, and Booker T, the latter of whom Cena had an excellent best-of-5 series with. It wasn't until the October 7, 2004 episode of SmackDown that he finally lost it to a debuting Carlito. This quickly leading to the former champ seeking his revenge, only to get kayfabe stabbed by Carlito's bodyguard. Behind the scenes, this stabbing angle had been done to write John off TV while he went to film the WWE-produced movie The Marine. And when he was ready to return that winter, he immediately set about regaining his belt, beating Carlito for it on the November 18th episode of SmackDown. But by then, bigger things were on the horizon because with Steve Austin and The Rock both disappearing from the company, WWE was looking for a new face, and they narrowed their search down to two men, something that would become apparent at the 2005 Royal Rumble, when the Massachusetts native and Dave Bautista were the last ones standing. That night was supposed to see Big Dave get the win, which he did after a spectacularly botched finish, and go on to WrestleMania 21 to defeat Triple H for the world title. But Vince McMahon clearly hadn't decided on who his man was going to be yet, because Cena would also get a big title win at that show, ending JBL's near-year-long reign as WWE Champion to take home arguably the more prestigious prize and become the top dog on SmackDown as a result. And as the next few months passed, it became more and more apparent that it was Big Match John and not Batista who was the one who was connecting with fans more, particularly children, and who had all the tools required to carry the company into the next generation. That's why on the July 6, 2005 episode of Raw, he was formally moved over to what was then perceived as the A Show, bringing the WWE title with him as over the next year, he solidified himself as the new face of the company. Initially, this run was met with a lot of positivity from fans, who had fallen in love with his anti-heroic Doctor of Thugonomics character. However, with him now representing WWE as a whole, Vince McMahon decided that he needed to make alterations to the gimmick, morphing Cena away from the bad boy rapper and turning him into a more of an all-American Superman-like figure who would stand for all things good. And while kids loved this just as they had loved Hulk Hogan in the 80s, much of the adult male fan base who had been brought on board during the Attitude Era began to reject the Goody Two-Shoes character, seeing it as passé in a Stone Cold world. WWE tried to counter this growing fan distaste by putting their new favorite toy into feuds with big-time heels like Kurt Angle and Chris Jericho, but this only ended up getting those heels cheered as the protests against this new iteration of John Cena continued to swell. Nevertheless, the company persisted in pushing John, feeling that the positives of the young audience he was drawing in, combined with the endless work as a company representative he was carrying out, outweighed the negatives of the boos. In fact, so much charity work was he doing on WWE's behalf at this time that at one point he even held the record for being the most requested person by the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Back in the ring, though, he was still struggling with fan perception, and this carried on into 2006 as he got into a WrestleMania program with Triple H. Sadly, the game wasn't able to get him cheered either, however, and though Cena did retain the belt at WrestleMania 22, things got worse from there, as the Massachusetts native's next major feud saw him pitted against Rob Van Dam, with the match between those two taking place for the WWE title in the Ultimate Enemy territory for the champ at ECW's One Night Stand. And that night, John was smart enough to lean into the boos, playing a subtle heel as he embraced the vitriol the live crowd rained down on him, especially the one fan who brought the now iconic sign reading, "If Cena wins, we riot." Thankfully then, Van Dam would win that night, with more than a little help from Edge, of course, to send the crowd home happy, but this left Cena the now ex-champion as a result. After that, Big Match John and Edge battled it out over the next few months, eventually climaxing their feud in an epic TLC match at September 17th's Unforgiven pay-per-view. From there, Cena spent the rest of the year dominating Raw as he began preparing for the build to a rematch with Triple H at WrestleMania 23. Due to the game getting injured, however, the company had to pivot and instead put Shawn Michaels in his place as the challenger. And what a lucky break that turned out to be for fans, because the match those two had at Mania that year was arguably the best of John's career at that point, and went a long way to showing fans who still doubted him that he could put on an absolute banger when he needed to. Still, despite this, adult males by and large were still rejecting him everywhere he went, and there were increasing calls for him to turn heel in order to freshen things up and stop the negative fan reactions. And while there's certainly an argument to suggest this would have been a good idea, just look at the wonders it's worked for Roman Reigns recently, WWE decided to keep Cena as their top babyface, reasoning it was still more important that the kids watching had a hero. John, for his part, has always agreed with this assessment, stating in interviews since that he was honored to play a superhero to children and wouldn't want to lose that for the world, while also arguing that it didn't matter if he was being booed by the rest of the audience, as the most important thing was that they were reacting to him at all. And he's right in that sense, because love him or hate him, at this point, no one got a bigger reaction than the champ anytime he went through that curtain. And he proved this even more as he was able to inject some life into a dead-on-arrival program with the Great Khali later in 2007. After that, he began feuding with Randy Orton, a feud that would continue on and off for many years thereafter, and in many ways go on to define both men's careers. This time around though, at that year's SummerSlam, Cena retained the gold, however, would suffer a legitimate pectoral tear soon after, causing him to have to vacate the WWE title and miss what was expected to be up to 6 months to a year of action. So it came as a shock to everyone when at the 2008 Royal Rumble, just 3 months later, he made his surprise return at the titular match, coming out at number 30 and ending up winning the whole thing in one of the most genuine shock moments in company history. Yes, it seemed like Big Match John had the regenerative abilities of Wolverine because he was back to 100% already, and from there, went on to WrestleMania 24, where he would attempt to regain the title he never lost. Sadly, he would not be able to do this, however, with him instead falling to Randy Orton at the Showcase of the Immortals, though he would bounce back by feuding with JBL over the rest of the spring before moving on to a program with Batista at that year's SummerSlam. After that, injury would strike once again as a herniated disc in his neck took him out of action until November's Survivor Series. When he returned to action after this, though, he would finally find himself with heavyweight gold around his waist once more, this time the world title, which he would win for the first time after beating Chris Jericho. And following that, he defended the belt up until February of 2009, at which point it was taken from him by Edge, this ending up leading to a triple threat match at WrestleMania 26, which also featured The Big Show, and where, after delivering a simultaneous superhuman AA to both of his opponents, Big Match John was able to once again live up to his moniker as he regained the gold, making him a 5-time world champion overall. And for the rest of the year after that, it was business as usual for the face of the company as he fended off every challenge, soaking in the boos of the adult males while basking in the cheers of the kids in the audience. Towards the end of 2009 and beginning of 2010, he would enter into feuds with Randy Orton once again, as well as Sheamus and Batista, and pass the belt back and forth between all three men until WrestleMania 26, at which point he put the animal down for good to become a 7-time WWE champion and 9-time world champion overall. From there, the summer of 2010 saw him get involved with the Nexus, a group of rookie superstars who had invaded Raw with the intention of taking over the show. Of course, they had quickly set their sights on the top dog then, and this led to a series of matches which saw Cena form alliances with old enemies, such as Edge and Chris Jericho, in an attempt to take down the Outsiders, while at the same time facing off against the group's leader Wade Barrett in a singles match at October 3rd's Hell in a Cell. And a loss that night would even see John have to temporarily join the Nexus as per a pre-match stipulation, and then later get fired completely, something which of course only stuck around for a few weeks before he was rehired and finally able to take down the Nexus once and for all at December's Tables, Ladders, and Chairs. Sadly though, this feud only served to add fuel to the fire for his detractors, who claimed that at the expense of getting himself over, John had done more to hurt the up-and-coming group than help them, something he was being routinely accused of by this time. And these accusations that he was hogging the spotlight for himself only got worse when at WrestleMania 27 he challenged The Miz for the WWE Championship, yet however left the champion looking like a third wheel as the whole thing ended up becoming little more than a setup for a dream match between Cena and The Rock the following year. Yes, WWE had made the unusual decision to announce the WrestleMania 28 main event 1 year out, giving the whole thing time to build slowly. What they didn't expect though was that during that time, CM Punk would catch fire following his now iconic pipe bomb promo, and that this would lead to the most heated match the company had promoted in years at July 17th's Money in the Bank. Now this is one that we've talked about in more detail over in our CM Punk video, so go and check that out for more details, but the short version of it is that, on this one night, John was fully able to live up to his heelish side, even more so than in his match with RVD, coming out to one of the most electric crowds of all time and playing things up perfectly as he fell to the hometown hero. But after that, he would continue to try to win back the belt for the remainder of the year. But by November, Punk would have begun his record-breaking 434-day-long WWE title run, keeping the gold out of Cena's hands for the entirety of 2012. In lieu of having this belt then, he instead heated up his program with The Rock as the two became temporary partners at 2011's Survivor Series before finally facing off a few months later at WrestleMania 28. And to the surprise of many that night, it would be the Great One who would get the victory, becoming one of the rare people to beat John clean. It quickly became apparent, though, that this was being done to set up a rematch the following year, but before then, the former champ would have to go through the kayfabe worst year of his career as he got beaten to a pulp by Brock Lesnar upon his return to the ring at April 29th's Extreme Rules, then failed to win the title back from CM Punk on Raw 1000, becoming the first person to fail at a Money in the Bank cash-in as a result. He also briefly fell to injury once again and ended off this terrible year by being betrayed by his on-screen love interest at the time, AJ Lee. Nevertheless, as 2013 began, things started to look up as he was able to win the Royal Rumble match on the same night that The Rock won the WWE title, setting up the rematch everyone knew was coming. And at WrestleMania 29, John finally beat The Rock to put his demons of the past year to bed and once again reign at the top of the mountain. This title run would last for the rest of the spring and would see the champ take on the likes of Ryback and a certain salmon-jacketed Mark Henry, but by SummerSlam, it would all come to an end when Daniel Bryan was able to pin him clean to win the belt, only to lose it again moments later after being screwed by Triple H, but that's another story in another video. What this meant for Cena, though, was that he would be out for the next few months as he had to undergo surgery for a tricep tear. When he returned in October, he was able to beat Alberto Del Rio to win his 14th overall world title, putting him dangerously close to Ric Flair's official record of 16. This ended up leading to yet another showdown between John and Randy Orton, who was, at the time, the WWE champion, with the two set to unify the belts in a ladder match at December's TLC pay-per-view, a match which Cena would ultimately lose. He did end up getting a major program at WrestleMania 30 to make up for this, though, taking on the up-and-coming Bray Wyatt in a match which ended up being one of the most anticipated on the card by the time the event happened. And while every other match that night saw the rise of the new blood, Cena would be the one to pin Wyatt to much criticism from fans that, once again, saw this as an example of him burying a younger talent to get himself over. And this, of course, was only intensified when he became WWE Champion once more at the Money in the Bank pay-per-view just a few months later, climbing over talents that some claimed were more deserving. As it turned out, though, there was a method to this, as his 15th title win would be used to get him in a match with Brock Lesnar at August 17, 2014's SummerSlam, a match which saw the Beast absolutely decimate Big Match John for 16 minutes as he delivered 16 German suplexes and left the champ barely able to get a lick of offense in the entire time. Yes, it was one of the most shocking squashes in WWE history, and proof that when the time was right, Cena was willing to do business and put others over, even if it made him look weak as a result. It even silenced some of his longtime critics as he spent the next few years firmly out of the main event picture, with him instead focusing on building the next generation as he won the United States title from Rusev at WrestleMania 31, then went on to issue a weekly open challenge which saw him put on some of the best matches of his career and even begin to draw some cheers from adult males for the first time in years. Yes, it was a complete late career revival for the face of the company as he was able to have some stellar programs against the likes of Kevin Owens, Seth Rollins, and AJ Styles, making them all look like stars in the process. And as a reward for this, at the 2017 Royal Rumble, he even got one last WWE title win, taking his record to 16 and tying him with Ric Flair in WWE canon. Since then, he's spent more and more time away from the ring as he's focused on his burgeoning movie career, and with him set to appear in both The Fast and the Furious 9 and Suicide Squad later this year, it looks as though his days in the ring, or the odd cameo appearance, might finally be over. Something that was solidified when he took on The Fiend at WrestleMania 36, a match which served as a David Lynchian-like dissection of his entire career and ended with him being blipped out of reality, never to be seen in a WWE ring again as of the time of this video's recording. And if that does turn out to be the end of his in-ring run, it seems like a fitting way to go out. But while he may be done, he'll never be forgotten, as over the last 2 decades, he's become what Vince McMahon himself has described as the Babe Ruth of wrestling, someone whose level of star power might never be seen again. Yes, if there's a Mount Rushmore of WWE, then John Cena has certainly earned his spot on it. So love him or hate him, you can't deny that he's in the conversation for the greatest of all time because he's done what no one else has been able to do. Not Hulk Hogan, not Steve Austin, and not The Rock. and that's carried WWE for nearly 2 decades as the champ, and the champ will always be here. Well guys, what did you think of the video? Let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, as well as follow Wrestle with Andy on Instagram and Twitter. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.